Welcome to Widdecombe, Webb and Woberts. I'm Emma Webb, or rather should I say I'm identifying as Emma Webb, who can't be with us this week, I'm afraid. So it's Peter Whittle. I'm terribly sorry to all the people who usually write such nice comments about Emma. But as usual, I've got the redoubtable Anne Widdecombe, former Brexit Party MEP, and of course, former Shadow Home Secretary, and Abi Roberts, a comedian. Thank you very much for putting up with me this week. As usual, we're going to look at really what's basically got our goat or whatever this week. I have to start, if I can start myself. This week we've had the independence ceremony in Barbados, and Prince Charles went over there. And it was reported that he'd said something along the lines of that slavery was a great stain on British history. And what did you make of that? I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable that the future king was saying this.
Well, it's such an complete nonsense. I mean, why couldn't he have said, that it was the British who abolished slavery, that it was the British who led the way in the abolition of slavery, that slavery was a stain on everybody's history, but there have been slaves throughout history. Now, where does this end? Should we be calling upon Italy to apologise for what the ancient Romans did in Britain? Should we be calling upon all Scandinavia to apologise for what the Vikings did? Where do we actually stop? And I think it's time to stop this self-flagellation about slavery when actually we were the people who led the way against it, and Charles should be proud of our history. He is, after all, going to be the king of this country.
Well, that's the point, isn't it, Abi? I mean, really, it's not. I totally agree with what you're saying, but it's just the fact that it was him somehow makes it worse.
It does make it worse. And I think he is, I do worry that some woke juice has seeped into the future king's brain, to be honest with you, because as we know, Her Majesty, our wonderful queen, raises herself above political commentary, and that's what she's done, and thank goodness for her, because we don't want Charles to be, now I think our relationship with Barbados and the Bajans is going to be awkward, isn't it?
Yes, I
sort of going forward, I think.
I think what you say about woke, it seems to me, I interviewed Julie Birchall recently, and she called him the granddaddy of woke.
I love Julie so much.
Mainly because of the environmental stuff and all of that. Yeah. But what do you sort of, when you look at Charles then, do you sort of think this is going to be a very rough patch? It's awful to think of the Queen not being there, isn't it? But she's not going to be there at some point. I don't look at it and think, oh, it'll be great to have a new monarch. I don't feel excited about it.
No, I'm not excited about it, but Charles has clearly said on more than one occasion that there's a huge difference between being the Prince of Wales and being the monarch,
yes.
And that he knows the difference. But what I would say to him is this: hang on, sir, the time is approaching when you're going to be the monarch, and therefore you do not now need to be saying things that you might have had the freedom to say 20 years ago. Now, I actually don't mind the environmental stuff, because at least His Royal Highness has put his money where his mouth is, and he's had all these initiatives on his own farms and things, and if that's what he wants to do and make a success of it, that's absolutely fine. But what he should not be doing is making disparaging comments about our country. That is not the role, and he will soon be, sadly, the monarch.
The thing is, isn't it, recently as well, last week, this is so worrying. I don't in New York, the statue of Thomas Jefferson was just removed. Thomas Jefferson.
Yes. Yeah.
This is not some kind of general in the Confederate. And you should think, is there some kind of suicidal impulse going on here?
I think there is. I think it's we really. What's really frightening and worrying is that we, in Charles, we should have somebody who is going against all this. We should have a bastion against the woke onslaught. Woke, I think, is too polite a word for it. What do you call them, Maoists? I don't really know. We need to think of a better word, because it's not frightening enough.
But they couldn't flourish if the establishment wasn't bowing down to them the whole time. And it's everywhere. It's, admittedly, Sussex did stand up for their academic, but on the whole, everywhere you look, the universities are bowing down to it, the civil service is bowing down to it. Everybody is kowtowing to what actually is a movement of quite a small minority.
But it's terrifying that corporations who are instinctively, usually capitalists, are now not. They're on the left.
Oh, yeah,
The people that were.
There's another way of looking at that,
Yeah.
and that is that the corporations are utterly cynical, and money and profit is the main thing.
Yeah.
And this diverts from, for example, economic inequality, doesn't it? If
Yes.
you don't have to face that, you don't have to face all of that stuff
Yeah.
if you've got the woke agenda going for you.
Yes. So maybe so I suppose. Yeah. How does the free market work? Then I suppose we've got to go back to that. So we've got to have corporations. We've got to have organisations who aren't woke, and then I think the people that are woke will start to just lose money.
Well,
Eventually,
if people boycott them,
Yeah.
and would you ever boycott, for example, say a company that had said something that you sort of thought this is outrageous or you didn't agree with? You know, a private company, someone you're a client or a customer of.
Yes, I did. I boycotted, a one-man boycott, I may say, British Airways for a while when
Right.
it actually said that an employee was not allowed to wear a
right.
small cross, despite the fact that it allowed employees to wear headdresses and bracelets and other symbols of religion, but not a cross. And yes, during that time, I did. Now, on the whole, I'm a great believer in free speech. And I'm not going to boycott a company just because it says something I don't agree with, unless and until it is suppressing other people's
Yes.
freedom, as BA was in that case. And if people are being dismissed for woke reasons and anything like that, then yes, I will at that point say, right, well, I'm just not going to use this company's good. I mean, at the moment I go into a shop and if they say French Brie or Somerset Brie, I say, don't be silly, Somerset, of course.
Yes. That's not quite the same. Not quite the same boycotting.
No, but I thought I'd throw in boycott.
Is this your pre-revolution? Come on, up the
No, but
revolution.
this is the kind
Yeah.
of thing, because like a lot of people, for example, did cancel their memberships to the National Trust.
I did. I did.
You've done that.
I
have you?
was. Oh, I did. Yeah, I did it
Yeah.
on air. I did it on the Jeremy Vine show, and I said I've torn up my National Trust membership. And how efficient were they? They rang me up and said, "But you haven't been a member." I said, "Oh, that's very odd because I've certainly been paying for it," and quoted them the reference
Really?
on the bank
Oh,
statement.
thank goodness.
Yeah, actually quoted them and said, "Well, come on, yeah." But that's an aside. I mean, yes, I cancelled my subscription on air. And I'm pleased to say quite a lot of other people did the same. Not on air, but cancelled their subscription.
Because remember when Gillette put out that ad,
Yes.
which basically was saying men are monstrous, you've got
Yeah.
to be better.
Yes.
It was going after its absolute base in a way, and
Yeah.
it had a huge effect.
Yeah.
It did.
They lost a
Yes.
lot of money. I think it was 8% market share went or something like this.
Yes.
And they scuttled back as soon as you could look at them.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever boycotted? Have you ever
Sort of not bought things. I mean, Ben and Jerry, only because it's for its critical race. There's an obsession with race. Ben and Jerry's. So don't buy them. Who else? Innocent Drinks, because they went woke. So it's quite easy just to sort of walk, sort of think as you're going along and saying, so no, I'm not going to get them.
yeah,
I'm not going to buy them.
The important thing is that they know why people
Yes.
aren't buying from them. That's what's so important. I mean, a lot of people will boycott, but they won't necessarily write in. Now, I mean, I'm
Yes.
lucky. I've got an excellent column in the Daily Express on
You never
Wednesday.
mentioned
Is that the one on the Wednesday?
There's
yes.
the one on the Wednesday. And so I can put in there what I'm doing.
Right.
But
Yeah.
for Mr. and Mrs. Blogs, it isn't enough just to boycott. You do actually need to let somebody know why you are boycotting.
Yes, yes. I think I sort of do. I don't buy Ben and Jerry's anymore.
Yeah.
You sort of, people say, what difference is it going to make to you? I think these things do make a difference, actually.
Absolutely.
After a while, you know.
Yeah,
Before we
yeah.
sort of leave this topic, I want to go back to something. You know, when you were, in Parliament and Shadow Minister, a lot of what people are saying now about the woke tendency is centres around the civil service. And
Yeah.
I just wonder, were you aware of a kind of cohesive political attitude in civil servants and in
Used to vary
administrative-
from department to department.
Yeah.
Now, in social security, you had a lot of very hard-edged civil servants doing things like pensions, and they were first class, and their analysis was first class, and they were innovative, and they wanted to look at all aspects of how you managed a future pension system. But just over the way was the Department of Education,
Yeah.
where they were so, what we now call woke, but didn't then, they were so completely woke and devoted to a particular philosophy, and anything that didn't fit in that philosophy was to be resisted. So in those days, I think it depended entirely what department you were in. If you were in the Foreign Office, for example, they were also first class civil servants in the Foreign Office. Now I think what you've got is you've got the spread of wokery right across the spectrum, and that is actually dangerous, because what you never need is a government versus its civil service. The civil service is the servant of government, and the government should protect the civil service, and we've lost that ethos completely. And that is actually dangerous. It's a bit like having the troops against the generals.
Yes, exactly. That's the feeling that one gets, you know. What about, I mean, just while I'm sorry, it's because this is the compelling issue, I think, of our time. I was speaking to Konstantin Kisin recently, the comedian, you know, and basically comedians have it in entirely different, you know, if you like, your kind of Mandarin class are bookers, aren't they? And venue owners and things. What's it been like? Have you been ever sort of, or debooked?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, last year was very vocal about J.K. Rowling and supporting her views, her very reasonable, rational, scientific views. And my acting agent just ghosted me. I mean, so there was no contact again. And then it was unbooked from clubs, unfollowed on Twitter, all the rest of it. And so penalised for a view that is scientifically correct.
Your view is that a woman is a woman.
Yes, correct, Anne. I know, it's outrageous, isn't it?
It's
just dreadful.
Shocking.
So, Peter, I have had the worrying thing actually in comedy. It's not so much the bookers and obviously that is a slight concern. It's other comedians who will, you know, like the Maoist, the thinkers, the fact check, the checkers, the people that used to check people's thinking. Other comedians are looking at other comedians and going, "Are you going to do that bit?" So there's a real sort of like feeling of, hang on a minute, I'm being watched by my own. That's that sort of internal censorship. Is very worrying.
You know, I think people talk all the time, don't they? Say, "Oh, free speech is under threat," right? The implication being it's sort of in the future. We've got to be careful. But frankly, it seems to me it's happening now. I mean, you know, we're having. I do want to talk a little bit as well about two other things. First of all, what happened in the Channel, the terrible deaths we had in the Channel. But do you think that it was avoidable, Anne?
Oh, I think the whole business has been avoidable for a very long time. I mean, I have been saying for 20 years that the magnet why people come to Britain, when they're in perfectly safe countries and could claim asylum there, the magnet why people come here is that they know they haven't got a claim for asylum, but if you get into Britain, you're very unlikely to be removed. We don't practice detention, we don't have national identity cards, we do have a flourishing underground economy, and they come here to work. Now, I was reading an article only a couple of days ago from a migrant who had failed to cross, but said he was going to keep on trying because he wanted to pay for his sister's operations. And I thought, hang on, you're paying a trafficking agent, you're prepared to pay him for future attempts. Why not use that money for your sister's operations? And what you've got to get rid of is the magnet. And I have been saying for 20 years, time and time again, automatically detain in secure reception centres all new asylum seekers. So that you remove that incentive to go into the underground economy and just disappear.
But the thing is, you see, I do feel that these deaths are terrible, but I do feel that the media suddenly have started talking about it when this has happened, because before it was kind of going on. People like Nigel Farage were reporting on it, but basically on the whole, you know, it was like one of these things we didn't talk about or the media didn't seem to worry about. Now, of course, they are, or they're talking about it. But, you know, when you sort of, as Anne was saying, that you know, you have this sort of situation where basically people aren't listened to if they've got an idea about how to solve this. Did you see the reports about the border chief? His name is Paul Lincoln, the outgoing border chief, who said something like about borders. Bloody borders. You know,
borders, what a load of nonsense.
Yeah, what a load of nonsense. He didn't use that language, actually, Anne, but I mean, basically...
he came very close.
Well, no, worse than that. You know, it's a pain in the arse, is what he called it.
Yes.
And I mean, this was the border chief. This was the border chief.
Yes.
Now, surely what that means is he's not going to be taking on staff and people who are very, very strong on borders, is he?
Yes.
I mean, it pervades the whole service.
Part
doesn't
of
it?
what we were talking about, about the civil service having one agenda and government having another. But then, if you are the Home Secretary, you are supposed to overcome that sort of thing. You are supposed to impose the government's will. Now, obviously, everybody has been shattered by the awful business in the Channel. I mean, children died, women died. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. But it was always avoidable. And until we actually get to grips with this, and stop looking for everybody else to solve the problem. Reception centres in Albania. I mean, for heaven's sake. Saying, well, the French should be doing this. Yes, the French should be, but we should be doing things. This is our problem. And if we don't get to grips with it and deal with the magnet, then the tragedies are going to go on happening. I mean, this was one that was just waiting to happen. It's horrible.
I agree, and I think it's interesting. The left is always more concerned with their own ideology than they are about when people lose their lives. Look at knife crime. They're more concerned with appearing to be racist than they are with young men losing their lives and actually solving it. And that's a real issue, I think. I would say even within the government, there's a strange reluctance, to be honest, about these things.
It is extraordinary. It's like 25,000 illegal immigrants, I think, this year, something like that.
Oh, we wouldn't know how many, would we?
Yeah, well, quite.
We only know the number of channel crossers we've found.
But have you noticed as well? I mean, you were saying before we came on air, I mean, you don't look at social media much. Fair enough. I do, and I know that Abi does.
Waste of time, guys.
Really?
Yeah, waste of time.
You're saying we're wasting our lives? Huh?
Yes, it's a great thief of time in your life.
Yes. Oh, well, that's a great argument, but I think can I just finish this point? Is that on there, some of the more rabid left were sort of saying, you've got blood on your hands. Did you see that kind of thing? If you actually sort of were saying, this has got to be stopped, if you were taking this kind of sceptical approach, you've got blood on your hands. Somehow we're responsible for this, for what's happening.
Yes. It's like, no, people who are responsible are the ones who are stopping the discussion. Like Anne said, stopping the practical solutions, which you've come up with. Why can't we do that? Do we just want to sort of... And again, we're back to this ideology thing. People are so obsessed with ideology as opposed to pragmatism. And I think that's
really
in a broader point.
I want to, before we move on, because I want to talk, obviously we're going to have to talk about the new COVID restrictions, supposed restrictions. Before I do that, I want to just dig a bit deeper on this social media thing. You say it's a waste of our lives.
Yeah, I think it's a thief of your time. But just like soaps on television, thief of time.
No, but can I just ask, are you saying this from a position of like having done it and then thought this is terrible, or is this kind of blind,
I wouldn't call it blind. I mean, I do know other people's experiences and I do know what is involved in Twitter. And I'm just very glad I've never done Twitter, I've never done Facebook. The only time I did do Twitter was not an account for me personally, but the BBC ran a programme where they thought that if you use these new methods, you were going to regenerate interest in politics. And they seriously thought, that if I advertised on Twitter that I was holding a puppet meeting, people would come. I said, you'll get 2 men and a dog. I think they
would, Anne. I think you're underestimating the British public.
No, they didn't. Actually, that's the whole point. We had this experiment and they didn't come.
No, but you see, this is an interesting thing. Anyone, so I know this sounds a little bit like shop talk, but it's very interesting. Right, politics is littered with people who have huge followings on Twitter and things like that, and think that this is kind of going to simply somehow convert into votes, for example. And it just doesn't. It's a different market entirely, isn't it?
I also think Twitter has got a tremendous power for harm as well. I mean, not people like me, but vulnerable youngsters, I think, can be badly harmed by stuff on Twitter. And I just will not have anything to do with it.
Well, there is something quite current about Twitter. It's not just a random subject. There is a new head of Twitter, isn't there, coming in?
That's true.
And basically, some of the things he said in the past are extremely dodgy when it comes to free speech. We have to look at what the current climate is, as opposed to free speech. Well, what the hell does that mean? Because someone's so powerful.
It means you go with state orthodoxy.
Yes,
that's what it means.
Because people think that Jack Dorsey, who looks like Rasputin, was bad. The one coming in You know, they're definitely going for. I mean, I don't know why communism is so suddenly all in vogue again. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? I think we should force everyone to read Gulag Archipelago. So that should be a forced reading in schools.
Actually, no, just 1984.
Yes,
Just people to understand the sheer power of the state. Yeah.
When was the last time you read 1984? I picked it up recently.
Yes.
It's almost, I mean, it's become this kind of cliche to say it's a work of fiction, not a handbook. But I mean, you look at it and you think, this is just
This is all
prescient.
happening.
You know,
Yes.
it's extraordinary.
Yes.
It was very prescient.
It was very, very prescient. Brings us to public restrictions because of the new variant, which has come in this week. I think, in fact, on the very this week, actually, we're going to be having new restrictions on transport and in shops.
Today.
Started today. Anne, necessary or not?
No, I mean, what irritates me is it's so contradictory. You have to wear masks in shops, but you don't have to wear them in cafes or restaurants. Now, today I came up by train to London, and the law says now that you have to wear a mask on public transport. But the law also says that if you're eating and drinking, of course you can't wear your mask. You know, it's quite impossible. So if you take your mask off and eat and drink for the entire length of the journey, you haven't actually worn a mask on public transport.
Correct.
And we've got just a silly set of rules. If you have a shop, an ordinary shop, with a cafe in it, you've got one rule for the shop and one rule for the cafe. But if you've got COVID, you can breathe it in either place. It is just a nonsense. Total nonsense. And I tell you what it is. The government must be seen to be doing something.
Yes.
That's what it's about. To
Yeah.
be seen to be doing something. Not to be doing something useful, but to be seen to be doing something.
Thing is, I mean, you know, apparently even President Biden has said we shouldn't. President Biden has said we shouldn't panic about this. You know, we don't know yet. It looks like it could be mild, and this.
That's what they're saying in South Africa.
Well,
which is where
the
Omicron
chief doctor,
started.
you know, the chief physician, effectively at South Africa, said basically all the people that I've treated, it's very mild, and she talked about you know, extreme fatigue, things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's turned into. I said the other day on GB News. We've got three secular religions: woke, climate catastrophists, and COVID. And actually what's happening is the mask, all this is being used for control, to control people. As Anne quite rightly says, none of it makes any sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
But if you think about it, most authoritarian regimes, none of what they've ever said ever makes any sense. Because it's meant to confuse you, it's meant to put you in a state of sort of constant fear.
I mean, I could have understood it before we had the vaccines. Now we've got the vaccine.
Quite.
The vast majority of people who are in hospital are the unvaccinated. So if we've all dutifully had our, I know you haven't, but if we've all dutifully had our vaccines, you know, why can't we be free?
Well, and also, what about an antibody? You know, you're having an antibody test, aren't you? Which is
today,
wonderful because antibodies is really the way out of this. Is if people say, look at me, antibodies, which actually last a long, long time. I mean, basically, I think I saw, I don't want to misname the scientist, saying that that is the solution. You know, that we've with everything we've thrown at it, we're out of it now. You know, and this variant, viruses always get weaker. Variants always get weaker, and actually about 2 years is about usually what happens with viruses. They just kind of peter out. It's not in their interests to stay strong.
What about natural immunity? No one ever talks about that.
And that was all the rage when we started. You know, it was all we must have herd
Vitamin
immunity.
D. You know, I'm losing weight, and I'm because isn't that sort of what you do? You sort of think, wait a minute, I really want to sort of be healthy. Let's do some common sense things.
Can I ask you as well about these polls, right? When the government makes, and for some reason it's always on a Saturday night. It was on a Saturday night, wasn't it? Why? Anyway.
Yeah.
Then a YouGov poll always comes out. This latest one's seen something like 80% support for it. I'm sorry, okay, well, maybe we swim in kind of political waters and there's more scepticism in some areas than others. But I can't believe 80%.
Yeah, I can.
Look, you can?
I can, yeah.
I can't.
I'm afraid the number of people who say to me, and today, you know, on the train, a lot of us were complaining about having to wear masks, but everybody else was saying things like, but never mind, you know, if it does what it's meant to do. And I actually think there is a very compliant, and I don't think we need to fool ourselves on this one, there's a very vocal minority against, but there's a very compliant population that believes that anything you can do is better than nothing. Never actually looks at the effectiveness of what you're doing.
Or what you're doing to children, terrifying them, and as I said to somebody the other day, I said, a mask, I said, it's the CCP love masks because it stops you from being free with both your breathing and your speech. Think about it, that is a symbol for control.
I have to say, for another aspect of that, you went through these climate, COVID, and woke.
Yeah.
You could add, you could also add slightly Remainer. I'm afraid, roughly, not entirely, but if I had to, there seems to be connections between those sort of people. I mean, this is not basically about Brexit being extended by other means or anything, but they all have the same sort of features. And there is this kind of looking down on people who are even just...
Oh, there's that, yes.
There's this looking down, you're stupid.
Yes.
The kind of public messaging in America has been very... You idiots, for not, don't you understand? And I thought,
yes,
I've
quite.
heard this before, but it was about 5 years ago.
Very true. And also this terrible, this forgetting the fact that the working man, the delivery guys, have never had breaks or furloughs or stayed at home and had, in their gardens, they've constantly been working. And those are the people we're deriding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which you're right. Yeah. There is a split in that same Brexit Remainer.
I think there's a kind of class element.
Yes,
I think the middle class people. It's very nice to stay at home if you've got a nice place.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
But frankly, if you're working, you think of the delivery guys who come in from Deliveroo and from Domino Pizza and everything.
Yeah.
All hours of the day and night.
Yes.
They never stopped, did they? Really?
Never stopped.
I want to finish on one story, which it was almost unbelievable, but. The Salvation Army, apparently, in America, so that means what is
It'll
it?
come here.
Yes, it blows its nose and we get a cold or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Essentially are taking on board critical race theory in its entirety. One of the strokes of which is that basically Christianity is institutionally racist. This is the Salvation Army. I mean... Have you ever had dealings with the Salvation Army? They're one of those sorts of people who only seem to me, whatever your religious belief, to do basically good.
No, I've frequently come into contact with the Salvation Army. I have a tremendous admiration for them. But if they start spouting that sort of stuff, A, they're going to alienate people, but B, it simply isn't true. Christians are the least racist people around.
Yes.
When we looked into the life of that terrorist in Liverpool, what did we find out? He'd been housed by Christians. They'd taken him into his home. Tell me that Christianity is institutionally racist. That's just nonsense. And the Salvation Army should know better than to be accusing their own.
Yes, I completely agree.
You're one of great faith. And everyone knows that. What about you, Abby? Do you have a religious belief?
I'm a Christian. Not a regular churchgoer. I was baptised into the Russian Orthodox Church
really?
many years ago by a wonderful priest who, I'll just tell you briefly, Father Alexander Men, who also was responsible for getting Solzhenitsyn back into the church. Really? Solzhenitsyn having been an atheist for many years. Slightly not surprising given the experiences he went through. So let's let him off for that, being slightly dubious. Then the priest that baptised me was murdered a year after he baptised me in 1990, and he was canonised.
Really?
Recently. So there's a long way around of saying I've got a very interesting. I took an interesting path towards faith.
But I think, whatever your belief, it's very, very hard not to come to the conclusion, is it, that Christianity, there's a real kind of, they're gunning for it. That's my feeling.
You mentioned they've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, but you mentioned about the lady on British Airways.
British Airways, the cross,
But it just seems like it's absolutely open season on Christianity.
And now they're even discussing, should the word Christmas, that's reared its head again. Should the word Christmas be? Does it really matter? And as I said, it matters more now than it has ever done.
I agree.
to have Christmas.
Actually, I agree. And in fact, not only have we had a very bleak time, I don't know, but people are decorating their places earlier. And I'm fully up for that. I'm going to get my tree.
Get the tinsel out.
No, I'm afraid I'm a complete misery on this one. I'm a bit like Ebenezer Scrooge and say, bah humbug. I think you put your tree up on Christmas Eve. That's when we used to put our decorations up, was Christmas Eve.
Do you open your presents also on Christmas Eve, a bit like the royal family?
No, I do it on Christmas Day.
Because it's exactly the thing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't get any presents anymore, but I mean when I did.
Well,
And I love the little nativity scenes. I hate the thing. I've heard stories about the fact that parents aren't going to be allowed to go to school nativities because of the wretched Rona. Isn't that dreadful?
Part of it is that you go and see the sheep.
Yes, you go and see your child being terrible as a shepherd or whatever. But it's all part of So that's the COVID thing has interfered with this whole.
Yes.
I've got a wonderful
getting together.
photograph of myself in a school nativity play when I was about 7, and I'm dressed as a shepherd, very, very convincingly, and I'm wearing a wristwatch.
Actually, we've got a Christmas special on when this. I will be re-identifying as proper Emma by the time that happens. Will you bring that in? We'd love to see that photo.
Oh yes, that'd be lovely.
Yes.
And as a shepherd coming next on this series.
With a wristwatch. With a wristwatch. Just like the centurion in Ben-Hur. Got a wristwatch.
Oh yes, the Coke can in the back of the chariot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thanks very much. And you, Abby, as well.
Bless you.
And
Bless you, my love.
I promise you a far more pretty face will be here next time. and we shall...
We want Whittle.
we shall see you next time. Thank you very much. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.